Get to the chopper!
Sorry, I was talking with my cats. Hello my dear friends, how's it going? I hope I find you all in good health and safe and sound. I'm Ari Thuriger, and here we are for another episode of classical studies, classical culture, or history of classical culture. And I am sorry, I kind of forgot I started this series. So many series in this channel at this point, it happens sometimes. Well, my apologies. I've actually started with the Greek religious mysteries, focusing on the Eleusinian mysteries, the Dionysian cult, and Orphism, so these three. And my intention was leaving it at that until I've made another video concerning legalism and the oracle at Delphi, to cover the most important religious beliefs in the ancient Hellenic world. But well, I have decided to further expand on these classical studies, mostly obviously based on your comments, and you wanted to know more about these subjects. So the idea here is to continue to make videos on the Greek culture, and when it's done I shall move on to Rome. Now, today's video is about the gods and the heroes. I'm not going to develop on all the gods and all the heroes. Good gods, no. I think each should definitely have a video of their own, and it is a lot to cover. Today I'm going to briefly develop on some important points of religion in relation to the gods and heroes and the perception of the divine in Greek culture, which may help understanding past videos on the subject and future ones. And I'm now going straight to it, if you please. Well, although there seems to be a well-defined general idea about the Hellenic gods, in fact, one of the first things we understand by reading the classical sources is that, in fact, the Hellenic gods were countless. At least that is what Hesiod transmitted to us in Works and Days, and I quote, if you please. Verily, upon the earth are thrice 10,000 immortals of the host of Zeus, guardians of mortal man. They watch both justice and injustice, robed in mist, roaming abroad upon the earth. 30,000 gods, that's quite a lot. However, from an early age, or from what literary and archaeological sources allow us to understand, a tradition was formed of the existence of a group of 12 gods, as in Asia Minor it was the same theme, religious theme. And they are placed in Greek religion with names and individualized attributes. And it was so firm, so fixed that these are the ones who receive worship at the famous altar that was consecrated to them in the Agora of Athens, not long ago recovered by archaeology. And I would like to take the opportunity here to point to a previous video of mine, since we are talking about the number 12 and this idea of 12 divinities. Some of you might remember when I've spoken about the 12 Nordic gods. So this is important to underline here once again, because there's often the mistake to think about the number 12, especially concerning deities and symbolisms, as to be an Indo-European religious theme. But it is not. Indeed, the 12 deities is something that is formed in the Hellenic world quite early, and just as in Asia Minor, as I said, although this is not a pan-European, or rather a pan-Eurasian religious theme. As in the case of the Nordic gods, for instance, as an example, we come about this idea of the 12 Nordic gods in medieval Icelandic sources, which say that the Nordic gods were 12 in number, and this does not go in accordance with earlier sources and archaeological findings concerning those religious and cultural subjects. The 12 Nordic gods is actually a Christian adaptation through the study of both classical sources and biblical sources. The number 12 is an important biblical number in the Abrahamic religious perceptions following the early contact with the Hellenic and later Roman civilization, through several contexts, including obviously Hellenic and Roman colonization. Through Christianity, in the Middle Ages, by the influence of classical stories, legends and myths that have had a great weight on the further elaboration of Christianity itself and later biblical constructions, it was added to other Eurasian mythologies, this idea of the 12 divinities, in a time period when such deities were no longer worshipped or part of any cult, and most pagans throughout Europe were already dead or had already been long Christianized. The number 12 then became a very important esoteric and magical religious symbol within Christianity, further influencing later occultic symbols. So that's that. Now, back to the Hellenic gods. These same 12 gods are the ones we are going to enumerate now, making reference to their origin and main attributes. Zeus, of course, of Mycenaean origins, the god of atmospheric phenomena and daylight. His name has the same Indo-European root as the Latin dies, origin of the word for day in several modern European languages, although the word day in English is obviously from Germanic origin, also of Indo-European roots, but the name of many deities, including Zeus, and other solar and sky deities, including Tyr of the Old Germanics, has its roots in the Indo-European word theo, to shine. Just one quick note. Sorry. For those of you who have studied Latin, sometimes I alternate between classical Latin and ecclesiastical Latin in some of my videos, depending on the sources, of course. In this case, the word for day, as previously said, classical Latin dies, ecclesiastical Latin dies. Anyway, moving on. Zeus. Some of his Homeric epithets, such as thunderer and cloud gatherer, refer to Zeus' original functions as a divinity of atmospheric phenomena. But already in the Iliad, his future moral attributes are foreshadowed, as he is the guardian of oaths and the protector of guests and supplicants, and in the Odyssey points to his identification with justice. Now, Hera, the goddess wife of Zeus, and therefore the deity of marriage, she was also Zeus' sister, just saying. Her origins are Mycenaean. Unfortunately, we don't have much information about Hera, which is understandable within a highly patriarchal society, so if you are disappointed, it's not my bloody fault. What we really know about her is that in addition to being the goddess of marriage, she was also the protector of marriage and married women, obviously. The classical poems themselves do not make much reference to Hera beyond the attributes related to marriage, other than, of course, pointing out her beauty and as being queen among the immortals. And so the poems always, one way or another, end up referring to Zeus at some point anyway. Therefore, like many female deities married to a god in a patriarchal society, Hera is highly overshadowed by her husband, which actually points especially to the Hellenic view of male power even over their own women. Hellenic society was not at all an egalitarian society, much less with a strong sense of gender equality, as many neo-pagans and cinema wrongly have pointed out or portrayed. I say this precisely because of my more recent videos about Old Norse society, which has also undergone many changes and alterations through modern media that do not correspond to the historical truth. However, one interesting and cruel aspect of Hera is that she punishes all women whom Zeus has fallen in love with. Zeus is also a god of justice. By extent, Hera shows the type of ancient Greek perception on justice. Hera doesn't care how women were tricked by Zeus, how innocent they were, their background, nothing at all. Hera punishes all women who had relations with Zeus, even basically the ones that were raped by her husband. And she was a very vengeful goddess. She did not just punish such women, she also punished their children. So this really shows the sense of justice and the idea towards women in the Hellenic world, and Modern romanticisms, as good as the intentions might be, tend to hide the horrible truths of past societies, and the more we bury the truth, the likely we fall into the same mistakes. Poseidon, god of the sea and earthquakes, and that's basically it. Right. There's a lot we can say about the Greek gods if we focus on telling the myths where they appear. However, in today's video, I'm only making reference to their origins and attributes. And the more a deity was venerated, the more attributes to it were given or added, and consequently, obviously, more myths written about the deity. In the case of Poseidon, everything revolves around the sea, earthquakes, the one who commands the waves, causes storms, just like his brother Zeus, but instead sea storms, storms on the sea, creates landslides on the coast and causes springs to flow, always around the theme of water and the sea and coastal areas. But not to be confused with rivers, of course, as rivers had their own deities, which is why not all waters were under Poseidon's domain. And like Zeus and Hera, Poseidon's origins are Mycenaean. Athena, the goddess of war, intelligence, and the arts. She comes from the Minoan religion, where she was the protective goddess of the palace, although through the Mycenaeans, who transformed her into an armed deity, she became their defender. Athena is a warrior goddess armed with a spear and aes, a goatskin shield or short cloak. Her attributes depend very much on the extent of her importance and worship in each city-state, but she also reflects the Greek, sort of the Greek perception on a warrior's value and worth, as she is also associated with or presided over the arts and literature, although she was more closely linked with philosophy than with poetry and music. A fusion between her attributes as a Minoan goddess of the palace, the place of knowledge, of the elite that controls several aspects of Minoan society, including knowledge, they hold the knowledge, with her warrior character through the Mycenaeans. She is also a patroness of embroidery, spinning and weaving, and similar household activities exclusively practiced by women in the Greek or the ancient Greek society. Apollo, god of oracles and purifications, as mentioned in the previous video, and later also god of arts, of light, and who in the classical period is identified with the sun itself. The most Hellenic of the gods, actually, who paradoxically was long considered to have originated in Asia Minor. Pindar, an ancient Greek lyric poet from Thebes, only enumerates some benefits of Apollo. He refers only to the art of healing, music, and oracles. Plato, in turn, adds to these three arts that of drawing the bow, well known since the Homeric poems. It is likely that Apollo, like Aphrodite, entered the Greek pantheon later, much later than the other gods. Artemis, goddess of hunting and fertility, linked to the cult of trees, is a case of syncretism. Syncretism, therefore, a fusion into a single divinity of personality and attributes of two or more. Artemis is therefore the fusion between the lady of wild animals, the furious goddess of the woods and mountains, already named so in the Iliad, and a goddess from Asia Minor who had worship in several places, namely in Ephesus. She is also a deity who presides over the births and initiation of young women, although she is a vengeful goddess and inflicts pain on women during childbirth, as if the childbirth process itself was not enough. Well, her true origins is still debatable today, as not only we are facing a case of syncretism, but there were also other varied worships and cults of this deity or towards this deity, some of which involve the presence of human sacrifices. The name of Artemis appears as a common denominator to which several related local deities were reduced or were fused to this divinity. Therefore, we are probably faced with a huge number of cults and various deities which, with the progressive Hellenization, have been absorbed into the figure of Artemis to consolidate Hellenization through religion, to the point that even the goddess Hecate, and the goddess of the moon end up, in later periods of course, being confused with Artemis due to this issue of enormous syncretism. Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty and gardens, is a goddess of Oriental origin. Once again, if we focus on the myths, there is a lot to say about Aphrodite. However, we will always see that this goddess is always wrapped around love and beauty. Like other goddesses, she's quite vengeful towards women. Again, it is not surprising, since we are talking about one of the deities within the pantheon of the 12 Greek Immortals, a highly important religious conception within highly patriarchal societies and city-states. Therefore, even the perception of the feminine is reported by the Greek masculine understanding from that time. The gods, the masculine, rarely take revenge on women, and revenge against women falls to the goddesses themselves. We see a clear reflection of a society in which women fight against themselves to establish themselves and survive within a patriarchal society. These social aspects are curious and, unfortunately, all too familiar still nowadays. You are probably thinking right now this video should be called History of Classical Culture with a Commentary Against the Patriarchy. I mean, man, look around you. We have been encircled within this shite. It's time to end it. It is pretty bad for us all. Hermes, god of shepherds and of the piles of stones that indicated the paths, right? Not surprisingly, his attributes are very similar to other Western European deities related to mountains, mountain paths and cairns, being therefore also a god not only of the stones that were used to mark paths, but also those that covered tombs, cairns, right? Hence the attributions of psychopomp, which leads the souls to Hades, that Hermes already holds in Canto 24 of the Odyssey. Therefore, he is also the deity of wanderers, travelers, and only later on in Roman times already, also of lectures. Everything indicates that Hermes may be a deity of Mycenaean origin. Demeter, the mother of wheat or of corn, her daughter Persephone was the wheat or corn girl, goddess of harvests, of the fertility of the fields, of the soils, goddess of agriculture in general. She is essentially the corn goddess or the corn mother. For a little bit more information on her profound significance in cult, check my video on the Greek religious mysteries, more precisely the part of the Eleusinian mysteries. She is without a doubt a Mycenaean goddess or Mycenaean in origin. Dionysus, god of fertility and vegetation, especially vineyards. Its provenance is still a matter of discussion today. It swayed for a long time between Thrace, Lydia and Phrygia. Today it is known that this deity already had a cult among the Mycenaeans. More information about the cult of this divinity also in the previously mentioned video. Hephaestus, god of the phenomena of volcanism, volcanic activity, therefore of fire, and hence by extension of the craftsmen who work with it in the forge, perhaps coming from Asia Minor. And finally, Ares, god of war, perhaps of Thracian origin. Even though we hear so much about other deities such as Hades and Hecate and Hades and such, the previously mentioned gods were indeed the 12 divinities and no others. Among many minor deities such as Hestia, the goddess of the home, we can also mention Hecate, coming from Caria, a region of Western Anatolia. Hecate was the goddess present at all sacrifices and all acts, protector of the magical arts, who was partially confused with Persephone and partially with Artemis, as I said before. This goddess entered the Greek pantheon at the beginning of the Archaic period. Other deities would have come later, as polytheism is an open system and should remain so. Among these deities, we will also mention here the Great Mother, coming from Asia Minor, who already at the end of the 6th century and the beginning of the 5th, before the Common Era, had a temple, the Mithron, in the Agora of Athens, and is assimilated to Rhea, the mother of the Olympic gods, and also the divine mother of the Minoan Mycenaean tradition. An honorable mention also goes to Adonis, deity of vegetation. The Mycenaean gods were naturally supposed to be siblings. As for the others, the usual way of getting them into the Greek pantheon was to consider them children of Zeus, and that's it. But in addition to the gods, there were the heroes, who were human beings who evolved based on historical data. A little bit like Pokemon. Human beings who have performed great deeds, great works, who were heroized, who especially protected the place where they were buried, as is shown in Sophocles' Oedipus at Colonus. The cult of heroes was rooted in Mycenaean times and may have derived from the cult of the dead. However, this theory tends to be abandoned due to the lack of archaeological support, in favor of one that places the origin of the cult of heroes in the Greek epic tradition. Normally, their category is not confused with that of the gods, unlike later Celtic traditions, for instance, in which gods became heroes and heroes became gods. However, a notable exception to this rule is the case of Asclepius in Epitaurus, who from a heroic mortal became a god of wealth. And another is Hercules, of course, the most popular of Greek heroes. The cult of heroes and the heroization of mortals was very common throughout the Mediterranean and the Iberian Atlantic during the Bronze Age. In other cultures, some of these heroes actually became gods, a phenomenon that the Celts and Celticized peoples later also adopted, but this, of course, in the Iron Age. Although, as was said, in the Greek context, we only know of two heroes who became deities, since the cult of heroes and gods, as a rule, did not mix. Well, a hero was properly a man who had died, a hero of ancient times whose veneration had gone beyond the circle of his people, of his origins, of his ethnic group, and had become general. He acted from his tomb and protected the ground where his remains rested, as well as the people who lived there. And this is it, my dear friends. On future videos, I shall develop a little bit more on other aspects of ancient Greek culture, the history, the periods, literature, philosophies and philosophers, and so on and so forth. I hope you have enjoyed this brief view on gods and heroes. I hope it was useful. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, thank you for today. Until we meet again, my dear friends.